Hello, Zach. Here on this weekend of our nation's founding by men whose ideals of freedom and rights were only applicable to white men, we're celebrating one of the finest pieces of 1980s patriotic cinema in Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer's Top Gun, released in 1986. Now, typically, this is the part where I indicate what makes this film stand apart and special, but I'd rather proceed with the summation before you empty that case of Busch Light as the founders intended. The film opens aboard the flagship Enterprise-class nuclear-powered United States Navy aircraft carrier, the USS Enterprise, which is stationed in the then present-day Indian Ocean, and somewhat inexplicably not being flanked by the cruisers, frigates, destroyers, and submarines that would typically accompany an otherwise defenseless aircraft carrier as part of a carrier battle group. The Enterprise has scrambled two Grumman F-14 Tomcats to intercept a pair of MiG-28s encroaching on the carrier's airspace. The fictitious MiG-28s, being played by the Northrop F-5, belong to an enemy nation that goes unnamed by the film. Because if the film put a name and face to the enemy, the viewer might begin to question why a lone U.S. aircraft carrier is operating close enough to the territorial waters of nations like Iran or India, which opens the discussion to criticism of U.S. foreign policy, interference in the internal affairs of other nations, and since this glorified sports movie about the power of teamwork is also serving as propaganda for United States imperialism, the opposing nation is left ambiguous so as to distill the situation to good versus evil. Oh, right, sorry, Zach, I'll get back to the movie, I swear that won't happen again. The two Tomcats are being operated by Lieutenant Pete Mitchell, callsign Maverick, played by Tom Cruise, and his radar intercept officer, or RIO, Lieutenant Junior Grade Nick Bradshaw, callsign Goose, played by Anthony Edwards, as well as the Enterprise's top pilot, Lieutenant Bill Cortell, callsign Cougar, played by John Stockwell, and holy crap, Zach, this is a long sentence. And his RIO, Lieutenant Junior Grade Sam Wells, callsign Merlin, played by Tim Robbins. The four jets engage in what can be best described as a game of chess, attempting to force checkmates on each other by acquiring secure missile locks on their opponents. Both pair of aircraft have broken formation and are no longer flying under the principle of a lead pilot and a wingman, where the lead pilot will act in an offensive capacity and the wingman will protect the lead pilot from aggressors. Maverick's Tomcat easily acquires missile lock on his opponent, who elects to flee the area, but Cougar loses his opponent in the glare of the sun and is targeted. Rather than engage the MiG conventionally, Maverick instead flips his jet upside down until the canopy of his jet is 2 meters away from the MiG and gives the MiG pilot the middle finger. This is treated in-universe as a testament to Maverick's flying ability, ignoring the fact that vertical stabilizers should be smacking into each other's planes at this distance, and that the physics of airflow around the two planes flying this close together should cause them both to crash into each other. The enemy MiG elects to disengage and flee. Maverick, low on fuel, begins to return to the Enterprise, but Cougar, traumatized by the engagement, continues flying aimlessly. He ignores the pleas of his co-pilot Merlin, and stares at a photo of what is assumed to be his wife and child, the presence of said photo being a violation of cockpit rules for pretty much this reason. Maverick continues to establish for the audience the reason for his namesake and ignores orders from the Enterprise and returns to Cougar's side, and coaxes him back to the carrier successfully. The entire affair leaves Cougar traumatized, having lost the edge, and gives up his wings, as shown as a gold pin given to pilots in the Navy and Marine Corps. The commander of the Enterprise, who goes otherwise unnamed but is played by James Tolkien, reprimands Maverick and Goose for violating orders and showboating with the taxpayer-funded death machine. Mostly for the audience's benefit, the commander continues berating Maverick, insisting his family name is not respected in the Navy, and reads off a long list of demotions and conduct violations which sound like they would disqualify you from flight service, since the common thread among them is a lack of respect for the chain of command and those around him. But because this is a movie, it's just a charming character flaw. In spite of this, the commander, who had been tasked with sending his best pilot and flight officer to the United States Navy Strike Fighter Tactics Instruction Program, also known as Top Gun, at the Naval Station Miramar in San Diego, is reluctantly forced to send Maverick and Goose to the elite school in place of Cougar and Merlin, additionally threatening him with flying an airplane full of rubber dog shit out of Hong Kong if he screws up more than he somehow already has to this point in his career. Maverick is seen arriving at the base riding a motorcycle without a helmet, in perhaps the first indication that the United States Navy in-universe is not run by people with a mind for safety. Maverick violates military regulations that stipulate anyone riding a motorcycle on base wear a helmet. He would not have been permitted on base without wearing one, and would have had the motorcycle confiscated and reported to his commanding officer by military police. Does it seem like I'm well-actualing this movie a lot? Nah, Zach, you're just being sensitive. The setting jumps to a classroom at the eponymous Top Gun school. The mission statement of the school is declared to the students by Lieutenant Commander Rick Heatherly, callsign Jester, played by Michael Ironside. The school is intended to teach ACM, Air Combat Maneuvering, or dogfighting. A pair of students are shown engaging in homoerotic banter with each other during the speech. Jester introduces the commanding officer and instructor of the school, Commander Mike Metcalf, callsign Viper, played by Tom Skerritt. He lauds the students as the most elite pilots in the United States Navy, and that he will make them even better. Which begs the question of why the best pilots in the Navy have to be improved rather than, I don't know, the less good ones? Is this a plot hole? Anyway, before we can continue wondering that, Viper tells the class that the top graduate of the class and their RIA will win the Top Gun trophy and have the opportunity to return as an instructor to the school. Singling out Maverick, he asks him if his name will be on that trophy, which Maverick responds to in the affirmative. That sounds like an idiotic way to run a training school, as students would be incentivized to pull dangerous maneuvers to win at all costs, which is why the actual Top Gun Academy is a pass-fail program, not a winner-take-all. That evening, many of the pilots congregate at an area nightclub overflowing with naval personnel. Goose points out Lieutenant Tom Kazansky, callsign Iceman, played by Val Kilmer. Goose declares Iceman their primary competition, indicating that he got the name by flying ice cold, with precision, resolve, and the patience to wait for an opportunity to strike. Which, if I'm being honest with you, Zach, just sounds like he's a fighter pilot with professionalism. We also meet Iceman's Rio, Lieutenant Junior Grade Ron Colonel, callsign Slider, played by Rick Rossovich, who is shown to be an acquaintance of Goose. Following witty repartee about ass-kissing and penis size, Goose makes a $20 wager with Maverick that he must have sex with a lady this time at the nightclub. Maverick picks an intended target, bandit, victim in Charlotte Blackwood, played by Kelly McGillis. After engaging in a painful rendition of the Righteous Brothers song You've Lost That Lovin' Feeling, in which the renegade Maverick receives the full backup singing by everyone around him, she agrees to let him sit next to her. Maverick's repeated attempts to initiate mid-flight docking procedures with her fails, as his one-dimensional personality as a hotshot alpha male naval aviator does not seem to impress her or dissuade her from making a big mistake with that older guy, who frankly just looks like he's there to conduct business with her. Maverick has the intelligence stat of a doorknob. The following morning, Jester introduces a civilian instructor to the class. Astrophysicist Charlotte Blackwood, callsign Charlie, is revealed to be the woman Maverick failed to solicit for sex the previous evening. Maverick, still thinking with his penis, attempts to impress her during the class with knowledge of the MiG encounter earlier in the film, which is met by skepticism by the class, but does interest Charlie. After the class dismisses, the two talk. Maverick still flirts, and Charlie insists she'd like to hear about the MiG encounter. Iceman confronts Maverick and asks who was supposed to be covering Cougar while he was showboating with this MiG, to which Maverick insists Cougar was doing just fine. Does this look like a man who was doing just fine? Anyway. Maverick engages in his first training exercise opposite Jester. Mentioned earlier in the film is that these training exercises have a hard deck of 10,000 feet. Though the film takes artistic licensing with the mountains in San Diego, which are only 6,800 feet tall, the purpose of a hard deck is to create an arbitrary simulated ground level, so that in the event of a training accident, the pilot still has plenty of room to maneuver or eject, which totally won't be a thing later. Maverick gains the upper hand during the encounter, which causes Jester to inexplicably start descending to the hard deck, apparently out of a better to die than be killed mentality. Maverick follows him below the hard deck, which, need I remind you, Zach, is an imaginary line that represents the ground, and successfully achieves missile lock on Jester, in what for the purposes of this exercise is several hundred feet underground. After the engagement is over, Maverick, against Goose's recommendation, buzzes the tower. Their initial jubilation is tempered by Slider informing the class that Maverick's victory does not count since it occurred below the hard deck, which again, let me remind you, means that it occurred underground. Iceman berates Maverick, who the film is trying to portray as the antagonist, but who is ultimately the voice of reason in the room, lambasting Maverick for being a liability in the air. Maverick initially wears Iceman's declaration of him being dangerous as a badge of honor, until Jester demands Maverick and Goose make their way to Viper's office. A somewhat legendary sequence plays out as the irate air traffic officer demands retribution for the violation of aviation safety regulations, including but not limited to ignoring air traffic control, unauthorized supersonic flight, and supersonic flight over a populated area, and his declaration that he wants some butts means that by actual right, Maverick should be court-martialed, dishonorably discharged, and thrown in prison, especially since by the film's count, this is either the third or fourth time he has buzzed the control tower. Oddly enough, Viper doesn't seem as upset with this clearly unsafe conduct unbecoming of the United States naval aviator, as he seemingly gives him a pass for the tower buzzing, and only seems to fail Maverick's first flight op for breaking a major rule of engagement, which again, I will remind you, is flying the plane into the imaginary ground. After dismissing Maverick and Goose, Viper and Jester discuss Maverick, and when the question of would you fly with him comes up, Jester can at best muster an I don't know regarding flying with a pilot who violates basic flight procedures at best and commits indefensible safety and operational violations at worst. Viper reveals that he flew with Maverick's father, which begins to explain Viper's paternal protection of Maverick. What should have been a triumphant, jubilant party celebrating not being thrown out of the Navy for the fifth time is instead a somber affair as Goose pleads with Maverick to stop flying against the ghost of his father. Maverick insists Goose is the only family he has left and won't let him down. Maverick continues to flirt with Charlie, who still seemingly rejects his advances, but still invites him to her place later for dinner so they can discuss the Meg incident. Everyone's favorite homoerotic sequence in the film plays out as Maverick and Goose play Iceman and Slider in a round of beach volleyball, set to Kenny Loggins' Playin' with the Boys. Maverick plays the round wearing a pair of denim jeans, which somehow feels more impractical and uncomfortable than any outfit worn in Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball. Maverick departs the game to make his dinner date with Charlie, for which he arrives late. Having come directly from the volleyball game, he asks if he can take a shower prior to dinner, to which she refuses, indicating that, hey, you're late, I'm hungry, sit the f*** down and eat your goddamn dinner, you pissant. Can you tell Zach that I have nothing but contempt for the character of Maverick and the blissfully ignorant military organization that continues to allow a blatantly dangerous man operate with impunity? Anyway, Charlie mentions that she's trying to get a promotion that would take her away from Top Gun. She also asks about Maverick's father, who he reveals disappeared under unknown circumstances in an F-4 in 1965, and that event has apparently been the catalyst to the professional prejudice that Maverick has faced in the Navy. Charlie correctly points out that the specter of his father is why Maverick flies recklessly. Maverick and Charlie share a sexually tense moment in an elevator on base, for which we are told to believe that a professional, career-minded woman is seriously starting to have romantic thoughts about a completely irresponsible man-child whose incompetence throughout his entire career have been swept under the rug by military leadership. Goose and Maverick are shown having lunch at a military airfield, in which it is revealed that Goose has a wife and son. The somewhat orgasmic scream of Carol Bradshaw lets you know that she could only be being played by Meg Ryan. Back in class, previous performance and exercises is being reviewed by Viper and Charlie. Maverick's engagements are revealed to be successful in spite of his high-risk, dangerous decision-making, indicating he has not mellowed out at the behest of friends and colleagues, while another pilot's engagements, implied to be Iceman's, are discussed as textbook. Maverick, sulking, leaves the class on motorcycle, revving his engine loudly to prevent hearing Charlie trying to talk to him. Charlie, having completely gone over the deep end, pursues him, both of whom completely ignore a stop sign and nearly cause an accident. As she catches up with him, Maverick admonishes her for her recklessness and insists that when he flies, his crew and his plane come first, which is just a blatant lie. This is an actual lie for which the facts and past conduct just don't support at all. Charlie inexplicably declares that there is genius in Maverick's flying style, but that she can't admit that in class because everyone in the room will figure out that she has gone completely insane, which isn't explicitly stated but can be derived from the fact that she thinks admitting his alleged genius will make the class realize she has fallen for him, which is insanity by proxy. The most forced sex scene in cinema history plays out as Berlin's Take My Breath Away has to do a lot of the heavy lifting to distract from the complete lack of chemistry Cruise and McGillis had, as neither actor seemingly wants to kiss the other, which makes sense in the modern era as Kelly McGillis came out of the closet in 2009, and Tom Cruise, who, look, he hasn't admitted to anything and there's no smoking gun, so I'll just blame Thetans for his complete inability to mesh with his co-star. Maverick and Goose's 19th training exercise has him working alongside Lieutenant Rick Nevin, callsign Hollywood, played by Whip Hubley, and Lieutenant Junior Grade Leonard Wolf, callsign Wolfman, played by Barry Tubb, both of whom have been in previous scenes. All four are shocked to hear Viper enter the chat, being flanked by Jester. Viper and Jester break formation, and Hollywood flies lead, staying on Jester, with Maverick flying wingman. While protecting Hollywood's 6, Maverick keeps trying to find Viper. Against Hollywood and Goose's wishes, as Hollywood has yet to achieve lock on Jester, Maverick breaks formation to engage Viper. He locates him and pursues him relentlessly. Viper is shown engaging in extensive maneuvering and is beckoning Maverick to follow him. The tight quarters force Maverick to switch weapons, and before Maverick can achieve a solid lock on Viper, the loud tone of their plane's radar indicates they have been locked on by another plane. Jester has slotted behind them and defeated them, having apparently outmaneuvered Hollywood and retired him before defeating Maverick. Jester praises Maverick's flying ability in front of the squad, but reiterates the importance of teamwork, and that the engagement was lost solely because Maverick refused to adhere to it. Antagonist in title only, Iceman, reiterates to Maverick and everyone else in the room that as an undisciplined, unpredictable pilot, he is more dangerous to their safety than any enemy plane. Maverick insists to Goose that it won't happen again, which Goose somewhat sarcastically acknowledges. Maverick and Charlie have lunch together with Goose's family. Carol tells Charlie that Maverick is clearly in love with her. The group sings Great Balls of Fire together. Charlie later steals one of Carol's lines to seduce Maverick, Riley saying, "Take me to bed or lose me forever," as they both reinforce that neither of them has any idea how a kiss is supposed to work. Training exercise 31 begins. A narration by Jester indicates Iceman is still in the lead, with Maverick trailing narrowly. Maverick is serving as the wingman for Iceman. And when they locate their 3 targets, Maverick tries to butt ahead, but Iceman takes the lead. Tailing one of the instructors too closely, Iceman can't get a solid lock. Maverick is hysterical, as he claims to have a firing solution if Iceman gets out of the way. As both men are in competition for the trophy, Iceman doesn't want to see to kill, and everyone around him is seemingly accusing him of taking his time, since time elapsed is also a factor in scoring, which favors him since he's in the lead. Maverick attempts to butt in front, and when Iceman concludes he doesn't have the angle to attack, breaks off the engagement. Unfortunately, Maverick passes through the jet wash of Iceman's jet. This form of wake turbulence causes his F-14's engines to flame out. The exercise is aborted as Maverick loses control of his plane, which goes into a flat spin that he is unable to recover from. Pinned forward, Maverick screams for Goose to pull the ejection handle. He manages to pull it, which causes the canopy to release and propel away from the plane. Goose's seat ejects first, but due to the flat spin, he hits the canopy head first and goes limp, as both Goose and Maverick parachute out to sea. Melancholy music plays as a Coast Guard rescue helicopter arrives. Maverick has to be convinced by the rescuer to let Goose go, so he can be airlifted, still unresponsive. Although this somewhat undercuts the blunt message of the film that Maverick's continuing inability to function as a cohesive member of a unit is a contributing factor to the death of his best friend, Zach, I'd like to share one of my favorite photographs with you, which depicts Maverick in disbelief of what he's about to be told by Viper, that Goose has indeed died. and that Maverick needs to let him go. Which, regardless of whether you like this completely irresponsible character or not, is still a weird thing to say to him when Goose hasn't even been dead a whole day. Maverick blames himself for Goose's death. Charlie and Goose's family can only offer him comfort, not validation. Maverick takes Goose's dog tags from their residence, which feels like a weird thing to not leave to his wife or children. A board of inquiry clears Maverick of responsibility in Goose's death, concluding that he could not have known that the jet wash in that moment would be there, and absolving him of fault in the accident. The soundtrack tries to play this off as an inspiring moment brought on by sympathetic military leadership, but all they've done is abdicate themselves of any responsibility in Goose's death. They allowed Maverick to fly an airplane, not only with his lengthy record of misbehavior prior to Top Gun, but also repeated incidents while at the program, that the entire Top Gun competition promotes recklessness that would not be present in a pass-fail system, and that pairing the top two competitors together would absolutely result in self-serving decision-making rather than sound tactical decisions. Before any of these thoughts can occur to you, Viper insists on getting Maverick airborne ASAP, and he's in the cockpit of an F-14 before the crescendo is even over. Maverick is shown in his next training sortie refusing to engage Jester, who is clearly taking a dive to allow Maverick to score an easy W, and is berated by Lieutenant Junior Grade Marcus Williams, call sign Sundown, played by Clarence Gilliard. Maverick, clearly suffering from a form of post-traumatic stress disorder, indicates to Sundown that he will fire when he's goddamn good and ready. Viper insists to Jester that they keep sending him into training exercises. Maverick is shown packing his locker. Iceman addressed Maverick by name and can only offer condolences for Goose, but does not dissuade him. Wolfman also witnesses the exchange and calls Charlie, telling her that Maverick has quit Top Gun. Charlie, having just gotten her dream job, confronts Maverick at the airport and tries to build him back up, affirming that he can't be happy unless he's flying by the seat of his pants, but that he also has to live with making mistakes. He shuts her down, telling her that if he wanted help, he'd have asked for it. In an uncharacteristic return to normalcy, she berates him for his sullen man-child behavior, which would have been perfectly valid in every other context, but is a weird thing to bring up when he's still mourning the death of his friend, and leaves him. Maverick, having apparently not left the area yet, visits the home of Viper. Maverick recognizes his father in a photo on the wall, and Viper acknowledges that he flew with him in Vietnam. Viper gives Maverick the classified information he's been desperate to learn his entire life: that his father died a hero in battle. His plane had been damaged, and rather than flee, he remained behind to save 3 fellow airmen before his own plane failed. The battle occurred on the wrong line of some map, and as a result, the State Department withheld the details to the next of kin. Asking for advice on what to do next, Viper tells Maverick that his existing point tally has enabled him to graduate the next day with the rest of his class. Or he can quit. Viper paradoxically states he won't blow sunshine up Maverick's ass, but then affirms that they're in a dangerous business, and that a degree of situational awareness and decision-making is an asset. In essence, blowing sunshine up his ass. Maverick tries to stop by Charlie's place, but a for rent sign indicates that she is gone. After an evening of reflection, Maverick arrives in uniform at the graduation ceremony for the Top Gun class, for which Iceman and Slider are shown as the winners of the trophy. Maverick congratulates Iceman. Before the party can get out of hand, Viper interrupts the main group to indicate there is a crisis situation that is both super important and also not that urgent if it can wait 24 hours for 5 Navy airmen to get back to the USS Enterprise in the Indian Ocean. The commander of the Enterprise tells the gathered seamen that a communications ship, which sounds like a cute way of saying spy ship, has become disabled and wandered into foreign territory, as the film once again refuses to acknowledge which nation the United States is experiencing heightened tensions with, enough to have a spy ship operate dangerously close to said nation. The gathered pilots are to provide air cover for a mission to rescue the spy ship. Zach, I've always been genuinely curious as to where exactly this boat they're supposed to be rescuing is. If we look closely at the briefing board, we get a longitude and latitude reading of 2032 and 6424, which puts the aircraft carrier in the North Arabian Sea, and in and around the coastal waters of Oman, Iran, Pakistan, and India. Communications with the Top Gun students later in the conflict indicate their targets are coming from the east, which would make the enemy nation in this situation India. So, the final mission of this film is to fly air cover for a US Navy rescue operation to rescue a civilian ship rather than allow it to drift into Indian territorial waters to be seized, which makes one wonder what information this ship was carrying that was so important that the United States is willing to engage in an overt military operation that could lead to outright war, rather than let the boat fall into Indian hands. Anyway, the plan has Iceman and Hollywood fly point towards the engagement zone, with Maverick remaining behind as an emergency backup. Radar initially reports 2 bogeys, but as they close distance, it's revealed to be 4, and later 6. One of the MiGs tails Hollywood and achieves missile lock and fires, striking Hollywood's F-14 and forcing him and Wolfman to eject, leaving Iceman alone to contend with 6 MiGs. Zach, this whole sequence continues to baffle me. The US is operating on a do not fire until fired upon rule of engagement, and yet, the moment the two nations' jets meet, India immediately opens fire without warning them to leave their territorial airspace, indicating that these two nations are clearly at war, which is somewhat baffling that the US somehow stands alone in confronting India without NATO backing, and while still engaged in the Cold War with the Soviet Union. Of course, India goes unnamed because realizing who America is attacking in this movie forces you to spend inane amounts of time questioning why these two nations are now in open conflict, which the film would rather you not do because, hey, look, America good, whoever that anonymous nation is bad, okay? Stop thinking about it and I'll play Danger Zone for you again. Maverick is launched from the aircraft carrier and given a bearing of 090 and 180 miles, which puts the conflict barely 100 miles off India's coast. The catapult of the carrier breaks after Maverick takes off, preventing any more reinforcements from being launched. Unfortunately for Maverick, once he arrives, he flies into the jet wash of one of the other planes and experiences flameout again, but is able to recover. Maverick, however, who is clearly still suffering from post-traumatic stress, begins to have flashbacks of the prior accident and flees the engagement, and is somehow not targeted and blown up by any of the 6 MiGs while leaving. Merlin berates him while Maverick apparently tries to communicate with Goose through the use of yet another personal item that should not be in a cockpit. He eventually regains his composure and returns to the conflict, splashing one bandit. I want to remind everyone, while this whole thing has been going on, that Iceman has been evading attack by no less than 6 enemy planes who are apparently completely incapable of hitting him. Through somewhat confusing choreography, Maverick and Iceman are able to defeat 3 more MiGs with only minimal damage to Iceman's jet. Giving up the conflict with no reinforcements coming, India's 2 remaining MiGs withdraw from the combat zone. Both Maverick and Iceman violate procedures and buzz the entire aircraft carrier. After both landing, Iceman forgets that he nearly died as a result of Maverick's actions earlier and embraces him, as both men argue who will bottom for the other, who will be each other's wingman. The commander tells Maverick the enemy denies the incident, so apparently 2 F-14s were able to beat India's Navy and Air Force so badly that India won't try to solicit world sympathy, which sounds especially strange when you remember the United States just encroached on the airspace and killed airmen belonging to a nuclear-equipped nation. Yes, India has the bomb. Wait, never mind, I keep forgetting it's not India, even though it is India, it's just the enemy. And when given the option of any assignments in the Navy, Maverick states he will return to Top Gun as an instructor. In the penultimate scene, Maverick is seen throwing Goose's dog tags into the Indian Ocean, which the film is trying to portray as Maverick finally letting go, but still leaves the viewer wondering why he didn't just return them to Goose's family if he didn't need them anymore. Back at Top Gun, the movie has Maverick and Charlie recreate their first encounter, with Charlie having gone full Jan Levinson. But the cinematographer thankfully fades to black before Tom and Kelly can demonstrate for a third time that they have no idea how a kiss works, as the Righteous Brothers and Cheap Trick close out the film.